Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I am your host, Mark Roberti, CEO and founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. And if you want to take your business to the next level with me, one of the ways you can do that is scheduling a free strategy call. That is over at markroberti.com/strategy. We will also throw that link in the show notes. Another way to grow your business is to get more emotionally intelligent. And there's a lot that goes into that philosophy that we're going to explore in this episode. How we get better at decision making, managing stress, all of that good stuff that's part of being an emotionally intelligent business owner and leader. So today's guest who joins us today, he has a focus on helping businesses and team leaders become the leader that everyone loves and wants to follow. Our guest is also a national and international motivational speaker, leadership consultant and trainer, licensed psychotherapist, an adjunct professor, podcaster, and a published author. The contributing writer, he's contributed for places like Huffington Post, Addicted to Success, Thrive Global, and The Good Men Project. He also recently launched his newest book, The Emotelligent Leader, which we will also throw in the show notes. But today's guest who joins us today for episode 356 of Breakthrough Success is none other than Kingsley Grant. Kingsley, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Mark, it is exciting. I'm so thankful for the opportunity to come and to at least add my little voice to the great work you're doing and helping people having breakthrough in their lives. So I applaud the work you're doing and continue to do it because so many people are benefited, and continue to keep up the good work, my friend.
Kingsley, thank you for the kind words, and let's produce a lot of great work here in this episode during our time together, because emotional intelligence is such a great topic for more people to understand. And it's definitely been picking up a lot of steam in recent years. And you're one of the people who's really helping others understand and leverage emotional intelligence to become successful leaders. So I'm wondering, before we get into all that fun stuff, if you could just share with us a little bit on how your emotional intelligence journey began.
It's a great question, Mark. For me, it's really, over the last 15 to 20 years or so, I have found that, people tend to look to me for advice and counsel and coaching. And at the time, I didn't realize what really was happening. Is what they recognized is my ability to manage myself as a leader. They saw that in my leadership. And what happened was, I think that was the attractive piece. And they would come and wonder, how were you able, Kingsley, to manage that situation so well? How were you able to keep so cool and calm under such a high-pressured, stressful environment? And at the time, I did not have the phrase or the words to describe what it was. I would just say, hey, it's my personality. I've trained myself to do that. But then as I have ventured and went deeper and deeper in my study, my research, I came across Daniel Goleman's book, and he, of course, is a person that's been pioneered or given the credit for taking that phrase emotional intelligence to the marketplace. And it's like, boom, I got it. This is what it was that I've been doing all these years, but didn't have the phraseology to kind of connect with it.
And it's really interesting how a lot of people are just asking like, hey, how are you doing it? And you took that deep dive in yourself. And sometimes it's really necessary for us to take that deep dive to really learn more about ourselves, how we can better grow our businesses, how we can become better people. And if you take a deep dive in emotional intelligence, you are certainly going to be a better person because of that deep dive.
Yeah, sure. Because, most of the research, actually the research as across the board have shown that the high performers, 90% of high performers across all industries have high emotional intelligence. Talent Smart, which is a research company, have researched over 1 million surveyed, and what they found across all the skill sets, 33 skill sets, that emotional intelligence, 60% of those who are being successful in any industry they were operating with high emotional intelligence. So what they've really found in their takeaway from that was that the higher your emotional intelligence, the higher your performance level across industry, hands down.
And I definitely believe that, because emotional intelligence, it just keeps you at a right place of mind. And it's very important to be in that right place of mind when different work comes up. And I feel like one of the things that can really stress people out is decision fatigue, which is one of the things I know that emotional intelligence addresses, because all the decisions we make can really add up, and making the wrong ones make things even worse. So I feel like we should start there. So I'm wondering if you could share with us, how can we get better at making the right decisions when it comes to our business, our personal lives, and everything else in between?
Yeah, I think if I just begin by giving the definition of emotional intelligence and then frame that or answer my answer my answer to your question that way, because emotional intelligence is simply the ability, right, to be self-aware. So it's how you are aware of emotions, and then the skill of using that awareness to manage your emotions and the emotions of those around you. So when it comes to decision making, if you're not cued in and a laser to accurately know what it is you're feeling, you're going to make decisions driven by your emotions. And we know emotional decisions on impulse tend to lead to a decision we regret later on. How many people I have spoken to, leaders I've coached, who have actually said, Kingsley, I made a hasty decision. I made a bad decision. And when they begin to share the context on which that was made, it's almost always have one common denominator: emotionally hijacked. Because what happened is that how we operate, as you know, Mark, is that we are triggered to either fight, flight, freeze. And so when we are in that mode, making a decision from that space almost always is going to be one that is a wrong decision, not the best decision, and are decisions we end up regretting.
Yeah, and the emotional hijacking, I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, because I think the biggest time you see it, where you have this long-term idea, a lot of work, a lot of grinding and stuff like that, but short-term things aren't looking good. Like in a business, like if you invest money in a business, or if your opportunity costs, those invisible stuff. And I feel like people could sometimes look at the short-term and lose sight of what they know or is very likely to happen in the long term. So I'm wondering, how do we avoid that emotional hijacking and just be able to combat it a lot better?
And that's really where I think the idea of self-awareness comes into play, which actually is just your ability to accurately perceive, right, emotions, and then stay aware of that, stay aware of your emotions as they happen, and then manage that so you can have a positive behavior. What I find in the business world and entrepreneurs and other leaders, what I find is that they are hijacked because they don't give themselves a buffer. They're knee-jerk reaction. They are just reacting to an impulse or to leveraging their position of leadership, or as a business person, they're seeing where that their balance sheet is like crazy acting up, and they're like, oh man, I gotta do something, and they act based on the emotions because the emotions take over, and they don't give themselves a chance to logically think it through and reference, okay, have I been here before? Have I actually had encounters that are similar to this? What is it I know that if I only ride this out, things will be better? And I know that leaders and entrepreneurs who do this, who have, you look at the most successful entrepreneurs, they'll tell you, and business people, they'll tell you that they'll stay with something that they believe in because they know that they've lost it all. They only have to operate by bringing those same skill sets, those same tools they've used in the past to do it again. And that's why they don't fear and worry too much. But if you're not emotionally intelligent enough, you're going to have this knee-jerk reaction made by decisions and upset relationships around you that you really need when you in this time when you're actually going through a very stressful or a very hard time. And I've had that happen to me in my own personal experiences, where I've actually made bad decisions in the past, where I have done it because I didn't really give myself a chance to think logically. And then also I did not bring in to my life people like a coach or a mentor who can actually help me at those times, because I'm so emotionally, you know, well, kind of riled up that I can't think properly. And that's what tends to happen with many business people, leaders, entrepreneurs.
And that's a really great point, because in the moment, it definitely feels very overwhelming. But if you look back at like some of your past successes, or you look back to see how other people have handled it, and just taking that step out before making a really big decision, or before making an impulsive decision, because sometimes it's not a big decision, it's an impulsive small decision that can get big over time if you continue to make impulsive decisions. So definitely some really great insights on that emotional hijacking. And I definitely wanted to cover that because I feel like it affects so many people. And like if you don't have emotional hijacking, you're able to control your emotions. That just makes you into a better leader who is going to be that better example for other people. And I'm wondering, in addition to avoiding emotional hijacking, because it's great to avoid certain things, but it's also great to have an idea of what we can do. So what would you say are some good ways for us to become better leaders, and also individuals who could be role models to others?
You know, I find, Mark, is that where the whole idea of self-awareness, and again, you'll hear me say that very often in what I do, because that is the crux of the matter. That is the anchor. That is that foundational stone. Every leader, every successful leader and entrepreneur, business person, they've got to accurately perceive their emotions, know what it is they're feeling. When they, and here's what I find sometimes, especially from the male standpoint, when I use the phrase emotional intelligence, sometimes people hear what I'm not saying. They think I'm saying be emotional, right? And so they kind of shy away from that because they feel like, oh man, I don't want to be emotional. I'm a mature guy. I'm a leader. How can I show my emotions? And that's so far from what I'm saying. I'm simply saying is, how can you be aware of what you're feeling? Am I feeling anxiety? Am I feeling a sadness? Am I feeling a depression? What it is am I feeling? Because if I can identify that accurately and understand that, then I can begin to decide, how do I manage this? And my management might be me going for a walk, me doing something that brings me pleasure, me calling a friend, me doing something that gives me a quick win. So I'm able to know that if I can identify the emotion, I can now find a strategy to counter that. So we might be in the emotional hijack, but if I'm knowing what I'm feeling, I'm knowing what I'm experiencing, then I bring in the big guns. I say, okay, Kingsley, take a deep breath. Take 3 deep breaths. Do some push-up, go for a walk. So actually, if I don't identify accurately, I'm going to fail in this process.
Yeah, and it's really important, as you say, to be aware, because, I mean, it's obviously something that we've talked about a few times in this episode, but it's just so important to really take that time to be aware, pause, and think and reflect, because that's what allows you to come up with the better choice. That's what allows you to be that better role model for others. And I think that idea of being self-aware is a really great habit for all of us to develop. So I'm wondering, in addition to the idea of being self-aware, what would you say are some of the other habits that you would say have been really essential for your success?
You know, I just wrote my new book, The Emotelligent Leader: Succeed Where Others Failed and Become the Leader Everyone Loves and Wants to Follow. And in that book, I outline 7 essential traits or principles that are so important for leaders and business people, because I know in my own life I have applied them. And one of those things is, you know, I have the 7 traits, but I won't have time to speak about all 7. But one of those things I find that is so essential, and it's craftsmanship. Say leadership is craftsmanship. By that I mean is us developing ourselves, personal development, our growth. Some people are not investing in their growth. They're not investing in a coach. They're not investing in their, you know, in a program, a course like what you have, Mark. And so what happened is that if they're not doing that, then they become stagnant, they plateau. And you cannot John Maxwell speak about the law of the lid. You cannot take yourself or people beyond where you are. You hit that lid and that's it. So one of the things I talk about in this book is the person who would say, hey, I need to find a way to grow myself. It's Abraham Lincoln who said that if I had 6 hours to cut down a tree, I would take the first 4 hours, sharpen the axe, and the next 2 to cut the tree down. So a leader and a business person, if they're not investing in themselves and their personal growth, they're going to find themselves stagnant. They're going to find themselves more frustrated because they are going to become intimidated, insecure by certain people around them, which also drives their business south rather than north. So I find, in addition to the self-awareness, is the skill sets that person is putting into themselves in developing their craft and become the best version of themselves in the industry that they're working in.
Yeah, and I really like that idea of continuing to learn. And I feel like the moment you stop learning, you stop growing, and then you start dying. So definitely really deep. But it just really goes to the idea learning is so important. Kingsley and I, we both host podcasts. We learn so much just by doing all these different episodes. And it's just really amazing how much you can learn from other people if you're willing to do the listening. If you're willing to hear someone else give advice versus you just talking all the time, not learning anything because you're just talking, you're projecting what you already know. So really great stuff there. I love personal development. Like I could always just talk about that for hours. But instead of talking about that for hours, I'm going to instead put a plug to Kingsley's book, The Emotelligent Leader, where you can get hours of great knowledge on how to become that leader who other people will want to follow. And also be more self-aware. A lot of the stuff we talked about in this episode is just more expanded in his book. So in addition to your book, where are some of the other places we could just find your work and follow you on your journey?
Yeah, Mark, thank you for that ask, because I have a podcast, like you mentioned earlier, the Kingsley Grant Show, and it's KINGSLEYGRANT, the Kingsley Grant Show, and it's where leadership and emotional intelligence intersect. So I cover this same thing on my show, talking about leadership and entrepreneurship and what leaders and high performers need to do to stay on the top of their game if they're going to succeed in the 21st century. Things have to look a bit different than how they did it in the last, of course, they were not alive in the last century, but the point is that how they did it yesterday, so to speak. So in my show, I talk about that quite a bit, and I interview people like yourself, which is on my show, to give people a way to look at what can they do, what other resources and strategies. So I do that on my show. And of course, I have my social media, which I post all those out on a regular basis so that people can have a chance to have an ongoing growth and education. And if I call it 3 E's, it's education, empowerment, and entertainment. And that's what I do on my show.
Kingsley, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing all the great insights with us. All those will be linked in the show notes, markroberti.com/E356. But once again, I mean, it was such a pleasure to hear all of your great stuff today and have you on Breakthrough Success.
Mark, it's a privilege again, and thank you so much for having me on the show, because I think you're doing such a great job, and I just wanted to come on in any little way possible to augment what you're doing and to make sure that people are continually striving for their best version of themselves. And I thank you for your work in your courses and all the things you do for people to have breakthrough in their own personal lives. And man, kudos to you.
Thank you.